The mining station Kepler 442b hummed with quiet efficiency as Dr. Sarah Chen finished her evening rounds through the research labs. The distant red dwarf star cast an orange glow through the reinforced windows, painting the corridor walls in warm hues that did little to ease the isolation she felt. 3 months into her assignment studying the local wildlife, Sarah had grown accustomed to the solitude. But tonight felt different. The usual background chatter from the automated systems seemed muted, almost hesitant. Sarah paused at the observation deck, her tablet displaying the day's research data. The Zephyrian wildlife on this planet fascinated her beyond measure. Unlike Earth's creatures, these beings possessed an intelligence that bordered on sentience, particularly the wolf-like predators the colonists had dubbed shadow maws. Their pack behavior showed remarkable coordination, almost tactical in nature, which made them both magnificent and dangerous. A soft chime from her communicator interrupted her thoughts. The message came from Marcus Webb, the station's security chief, and his words made her blood run cold. "Sarah, we've got a problem." Long-range sensors detected a massive shadow maw pack moving toward the Eastern Research Outpost. Dr. Korvek and his cubs are there. Dr. Korvek was a Rillan scientist, one of the few alien researchers working alongside humans in the frontier territories. His species resembled a cross between Earth's wolves and bears, standing nearly 7 feet tall with thick fur and intelligent golden eyes. What made this situation particularly urgent was that Korvek had brought his young cubs to the outpost for their first field experience. Rillan cubs were precious beyond measure to their species, and losing them would be catastrophic for diplomatic relations between humans and Rillans. Sarah's mind raced as she absorbed the implications. The Eastern Outpost was a small research facility, barely more than a prefabricated shelter with basic defensive systems. It was designed for studying plant life and soil composition, not for withstanding a coordinated attack from apex predators. The outpost's energy barriers could repel individual creatures, but a full pack of shadow maws would overwhelm them within minutes. She rushed to the command center where Marcus was coordinating with the outpost. The holographic display showed the tactical situation in stark detail. Dozens of red dots representing the shadow maw pack were converging on the outpost's position from multiple directions. The pack's movement patterns suggested a level of strategic thinking that chilled Sarah to the bone. These weren't mindless beasts driven by hunger. They were intelligent hunters, executing a coordinated assault. "How long until they reach the outpost?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her stomach. Marcus's weathered face was grim. 40 minutes. Maybe less. The evacuation shuttle is grounded for repairs, and the nearest rescue team is 3 hours away. Even if we sent a transport now, it wouldn't reach them in time. The communication channel crackled to life, and Dr. Korvek's deep, rumbling voice filled the room. His words carried the controlled panic of a father protecting his young. "Human friends, the defensive systems detect multiple large signatures approaching our position. My cubs are frightened, and I fear our standard protocols may not be sufficient for this threat level." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, weighing the impossible decision before her. The mining station's fastest transport could reach the outpost in 25 minutes, but it would be a one-way trip into certain danger. The transport was lightly armored and had minimal defensive capabilities against a pack of shadow maws. Anyone who went would be walking into a death trap. "I'm going," Sarah announced, her voice cutting through the tense silence in the command center. Marcus spun around, his expression a mixture of admiration and horror. "Sarah, that's suicide. Those shadow maws will tear through that transport like tissue paper. Even if you reach the outpost, you'll just be adding yourself to the casualty list." Sarah was already moving toward the equipment lockers, pulling on her field gear with practiced efficiency. Korvek has 3 cubs with him, Marcus, children who've never faced anything more dangerous than a laboratory rat. I've studied these creatures for months. I know their behavior patterns, their hunting strategies, their weaknesses. If anyone has a chance of keeping those cubs alive until help arrives, it's me. The transport bay echoed with the sound of Sarah's boots on metal flooring as she performed the pre-flight checks with mechanical precision. Her hands moved with the confidence of someone who had made peace with their decision. Even as her heart hammered against her ribs, the transport's modest cargo bay contained emergency medical supplies, portable energy barriers, and a collection of sonic deterrents she had developed during her wildlife research. As the transport's engines hummed to life, Sarah opened a communication channel to the outpost. "Doctor," Korvek's voice carried across the void between them, heavy with the weight of impending doom. "Dr. Chen, my scanners show you approaching in a transport vessel. Please, you must not endanger yourself for our sake. My species accepts the risks of frontier research." "Korvek, I'm not doing this just for you," Sarah replied, her voice steady as she guided the transport through the planet's turbulent atmosphere. "I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. Humans don't abandon their friends when they're in trouble, regardless of what species they belong to." The eastern outpost appeared on her view screen as a small cluster of lights against the darkening landscape. From this distance, it looked peaceful and secure. But Sarah's sensors told a different story. Heat signatures were moving through the surrounding forest like ghosts, dozens of them, all converging on the fragile sanctuary where a frightened father was trying to protect his children. Sarah's transport touched down just as the first shadow maw emerged from the tree line. The creature was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure, standing nearly 4 feet at the shoulder, with sleek black fur that seemed to absorb light. Its eyes glowed with an intelligence that made Sarah's skin crawl. And when it opened its mouth to issue a low hunting call, she could see rows of razor-sharp teeth, designed for tearing flesh from bone. Dr. Korvek met her at the outpost's entrance, his massive frame somehow managing to convey both gratitude and despair. Behind him, 3 small Rillan cubs huddled together, their golden eyes wide with terror as they sensed the approaching danger. The cubs couldn't have been more than adolescents by human standards, their fur still bearing the lighter coloration of youth. "Dr. Chen, I am grateful beyond words for your courage, but I fear we have merely added another tragedy to this night," Korvek rumbled, his voice heavy with the weight of responsibility. "The defensive systems show 47 distinct heat signatures surrounding our position. Even if we had a full military squad, the odds would be overwhelming." Sarah looked at the cubs and felt something primal stir within her chest. These weren't just alien children. They were innocents who deserved a chance to grow up and see the wonders the universe had to offer. The thought of them being torn apart by predators while she stood by helplessly was unacceptable. "Then we don't play by their rules," Sarah said, her voice taking on a tone that surprised even her with its determination. "I've been studying pack behavior for months. Shadow maws are intelligent, but they're also predictable. They follow specific hierarchical patterns, and every pack has an alpha that coordinates the hunt. If we can identify and neutralize the alpha, the rest will fall into confusion." The outpost shuddered as something heavy struck the outer walls. Through the reinforced windows, Sarah could see dozens of yellow eyes reflecting the facility's emergency lighting. The shadow maws were testing the defenses, probing for weaknesses with the patience of experienced hunters who knew their prey had nowhere to run. Korvek's cubs whimpered softly, pressing closer to their father as the sounds of the encircling predators grew louder. Sarah knelt down to their level, meeting their frightened gazes with calm determination. Despite the language barrier, her tone conveyed reassurance and strength. "It's going to be okay," she whispered, not knowing if they could understand her words, but hoping they could sense her intent. "I won't let anything happen to you." As if in response to her promise, the largest shadow maw Sarah had ever seen emerged from the forest. This creature was clearly the alpha, standing nearly 5 feet tall with scars crisscrossing its hide that spoke of countless battles for dominance. When it looked directly at the outpost, Sarah felt the weight of its intelligence pressing against her like a physical force. The siege had begun, and Sarah realized that the next few hours would determine whether 3 innocent lives would see another sunrise. The outpost's emergency lighting cast eerie shadows through the reinforced windows as Sarah studied the tactical display on her portable scanner. The Shadow Maw pack had arranged itself in a perfect encirclement, with smaller groups positioned at strategic intervals, while the massive Alpha maintained its position directly in front of the main entrance. The formation spoke of intelligence that went far beyond mere animal instinct. "Their behavior patterns are fascinating," Sarah murmured to herself, her scientific mind unable to completely suppress its curiosity even in the face of mortal danger. Look at this formation, Korvek. They've positioned scouts at every possible escape route, while maintaining a reserve force that can respond to any breakout attempt. Dr. Korvek's golden eyes reflected both admiration and confusion at Sarah's ability to remain analytical under pressure. His own species was brave in combat, but this human's calm examination of their dire situation bordered on the incomprehensible. Dr. Chen, while I appreciate your scientific observations, perhaps we should focus on immediate survival strategies? Sarah nodded, forcing herself to shift from researcher mode to survivor mode. The outpost's defensive systems were designed to repel individual predators or small groups, not a coordinated assault from nearly 50 intelligent hunters. The energy barriers would hold for perhaps 30 minutes under sustained assault, and the sonic deterrence would be useless once the shadow maws adapted to their frequencies. One of the cubs, a small female with distinctively patterned fur, approached Sarah cautiously. The young Rillan's eyes held a mixture of fear and curiosity as she examined the strange human who had risked her life to help them. Sarah knelt down and extended her hand slowly, allowing the cub to sniff her scent and assess her intentions. She's brave, Sarah said softly, as the cub tentatively touched Sarah's hand with her nose. What's her name? Lyra, Korvek replied, his voice heavy with parental pride and fear. She is the most curious of my offspring, always asking questions about the universe and its mysteries. She reminds me much of human scientists in her insatiable desire for knowledge. The moment of tenderness was shattered by a tremendous impact against the outpost's outer wall. Through the reinforced transparency, Sarah could see the alpha shadow maw had begun testing the structural integrity of their shelter. Its claws, each as long as Sarah's fingers, scraped against the metal plating with the precision of an engineer examining a building's weaknesses. Sarah's scanner began detecting electromagnetic fluctuations from the defensive barriers. The constant pressure from multiple shadow maws was draining the power cells faster than anticipated. At current consumption rates, they had perhaps 20 minutes before the barriers failed completely. Korvek, I need you to gather everything flammable in the outpost, Sarah said, her mind racing through possible defensive strategies. Fabric, paper, chemical compounds, anything that can create smoke and confusion. While the Rillan scientist began collecting materials, Sarah focused on her portable research equipment. Her sonic analysis devices weren't designed as weapons, but they could be modified to produce frequencies that would cause discomfort to the shadow maw's sensitive hearing. It wouldn't stop them, but it might buy precious time. The three cubs huddled together near the center of the outpost, their large eyes tracking every movement as the adults prepared for the inevitable assault. Their father spoke to them in the low, rumbling tones of the Rillan language, his words clearly meant to comfort and prepare them for what was to come. What are you telling them? Sarah asked, as she worked to modify the sonic equipment. I am explaining that sometimes, good people must make hard choices to protect those they care about, Korvek replied solemnly. I am telling them that you are demonstrating one of the finest qualities I have observed in humans. The willingness to sacrifice for others, even strangers. Sarah paused in her work, feeling the weight of that responsibility settling on her shoulders. These cubs weren't just alien children. They represented the future of human-Rillan cooperation in the frontier territories. Their survival could strengthen the bonds between two species, while their deaths would cast a shadow over relations for generations. The alpha shadow maw's hunting call echoed through the night, a sound that seemed to penetrate the outpost's walls and resonate in Sarah's bones. It was answered by dozens of similar calls from the surrounding pack, creating a symphony of predatory intent that made even Korvek's ears flatten against his skull. They're coordinating their final assault, Sarah observed, watching the tactical display as the pack formations shifted. The alpha is directing specific groups to focus on different sections of the perimeter. They're going to hit us from multiple directions simultaneously. The first barrier failed with a shower of sparks and a low humming sound that died away into ominous silence. Through the gap, Sarah could see yellow eyes gleaming with anticipation as the shadow maws sensed their victory drawing near. The remaining barriers flickered under increasing pressure, their energy fields visibly weakening with each passing second. Sarah activated her modified sonic deterrence, filling the air with frequencies that caused the approaching predators to pause and shake their heads in discomfort. The effect was temporary, but it bought them a few precious moments to implement their desperate plan. When the barriers fail, I want you to take the cubs to the back storage room and barricade the door, Sarah instructed Korvek as she gathered the flammable materials they had collected. I'm going to create a distraction that should draw most of the pack away from your position. Korvek's expression shifted to one of horror as he realized what Sarah was planning. Dr. Chen, you cannot mean to face them alone. My species values courage above all other virtues. But what you propose is not courage, it is suicide. Maybe, Sarah replied, checking the charge on her emergency flare gun and the small collection of smoke grenades she had brought from the transport. But it's also the best chance those cubs have of surviving until rescue arrives. Shadowmaw pack behavior focuses on eliminating the most active threat first. If I can draw their attention and keep them occupied, they might ignore the storage room long enough for help to reach us. The second barrier failed, and the sound of claws on metal grew louder as the Shadowmaws began testing the outpost's physical defenses. Sarah could hear them working with methodical intelligence, each creature assigned to a specific section of the perimeter, as they prepared to breach the final obstacles between them and their prey. Little Lyra approached Sarah one final time, her small hand reaching out to touch the human's arm. Despite the language barrier, her gesture conveyed gratitude and an understanding that transcended species boundaries. Sarah knelt down and gently stroked the cub's fur, memorizing the feeling of trust and innocence that radiated from the young Rillan. Take care of her, Sarah whispered to Korvek as the final barrier began to flicker and fail. Take care of all of them. Make sure they grow up to build bridges between our peoples. The last energy field collapsed with a sound like breaking glass, and the Alpha Shadowmaw's massive form filled the doorway as it led the pack's charge into the outpost. Its intelligent eyes locked onto Sarah's position immediately, recognizing her as both threat and prey. Behind it, dozens of other predators poured through the breached defenses, like a living tide of death. Sarah stood between the advancing pack and the storage room where Korvek was shepherding his cubs to safety. In that moment, facing impossible odds with nothing but improvised weapons and desperate determination, she felt something primal awaken within her. The same instinct that had driven her ancestors to defend their young against cave bears and saber-toothed cats now coursed through her veins. She raised her flare gun and fired directly into the Alpha's face, the brilliant red light temporarily blinding the massive predator. As it stumbled backward in surprise and pain, Sarah activated her smoke grenades and hurled them into the advancing pack. The storage room door slammed shut behind her as Korvek and his cubs reached safety. Now Sarah stood alone in the main chamber, surrounded by smoke and the glowing eyes of nearly 50 apex predators. The Alpha Shadowmaw recovered from the flare's impact and fixed its gaze on her with something that almost resembled respect. It had expected easy prey, but this small human was proving to be a worthy adversary. Sarah Chen, xenobiologist and researcher, had become something else entirely. She had become humanity's shield against the darkness, standing ready to sacrifice everything to protect 3 alien children who represented hope for the future. The pack sensed her transformation and hesitated for just a moment, uncertain how to respond to prey that had suddenly become a predator. That moment of hesitation would determine whether courage could triumph over overwhelming odds. The smoke grenades filled the outpost with dense clouds that reduced visibility to mere inches. But Sarah had spent months studying Shadowmaw behavior and knew they relied heavily on scent and hearing rather than sight. She moved through the artificial fog with purpose, using her knowledge of the facility's layout to maintain a tactical advantage over the confused predators. The Alpha Shadowmaw issued a series of complex vocalizations that Sarah recognized as hunting commands. Even blinded by smoke, the pack leader was attempting to coordinate his subordinates' movements. Sarah used her modified sonic equipment to disrupt their communications, sending discordant frequencies through the air that made the predators shake their heads in discomfort and confusion. A smaller Shadowmaw emerged from the smoke directly in front of Sarah, its jaws gaping wide as it lunged for her throat. She rolled aside at the last moment, feeling the creature's claws whistle past her head as she brought her emergency cutting torch to bear. The intense flame caught the predator across its flank, sending it howling back into the smoke with fur singed and ego bruised. From the storage room, Sarah could hear Korvek's deep voice speaking to his cubs in calm, reassuring tones. The Rillan father was doing everything in his power to keep his children from hearing the sounds of battle raging just beyond the barricaded door. Sarah drew strength from that knowledge, understanding that every second she could keep the pack's attention focused on her was another moment of safety for the innocent lives she was protecting. The Alpha's massive form loomed out of the smoke like a nightmare given flesh. This close, Sarah could see the intelligence burning in its yellow eyes, the careful calculation as it assessed her movements and adapted its tactics accordingly. This wasn't just a predator hunting prey. It was one apex being recognizing another and adjusting its strategy to match the threat level. Sarah fainted left with her cutting torch, then dove right as the Alpha's claws swept through the space where she had been standing. The creature's reflexes were incredible, but its massive size worked against it in the confined space of the outpost. Sarah used the furniture and equipment as obstacles, forcing the Alpha to navigate around barriers while she maintained her mobility advantage. Her portable scanner chimed with an incoming message from Marcus back at the mining station. Through her earpiece, his voice carried both hope and desperation. "Sarah, rescue team is still 90 minutes out, but we're picking up something interesting on long-range sensors. There's a second pack of creatures moving toward your position, but these aren't shadow maws. Thermal signatures suggest they're something much larger." Sarah's blood ran cold as she processed this information. If a second pack of unknown predators was approaching, her desperate delaying tactics would become meaningless. The cubs would face an even more overwhelming threat, and there would be nothing anyone could do to save them. But as the seconds passed, something strange began to happen. The Alpha Shadow Maw's attacks became less aggressive, more cautious. It was studying Sarah's movements with the intensity of a master tactician observing a worthy opponent. When she managed to score another hit with her cutting torch, the massive predator actually seemed to nod with something resembling approval. The truth hit Sarah like a physical blow. The Shadow Maws weren't just intelligent hunters. They were sapient beings, capable of recognizing courage and honor in their enemies. The Alpha wasn't trying to kill her anymore. It was testing her, measuring her worth as a warrior and protector. Understanding flooded through Sarah as she remembered obscure details from her xenobiology research. Some predator species developed ritualized combat behaviors when faced with particularly determined prey. If she could prove her worthiness as a defender, the pack might actually withdraw rather than continue an assault that could cost them significant casualties. Sarah straightened her shoulders and faced the Alpha directly, no longer dodging or weaving but standing her ground with the cutting torch held ready. She met the creature's intelligent gaze and let her own determination shine through. In that moment, human and alien apex predator communicated without words, sharing an understanding that transcended species boundaries. The Alpha issued a low, complex vocalization that caused every other Shadow Maw in the outpost to freeze in place. Sarah couldn't understand the words, but the tone carried unmistakable authority and something that sounded remarkably like respect. The massive predator took one step forward, then lowered its head in what could only be described as a bow. The sound of approaching engines filled the air outside the outpost, but these weren't the rescue shuttles Sarah had been expecting. The mysterious second pack Marcus had detected was arriving. And as Sarah peered through the smoke-filled windows, her heart nearly stopped. Massive shapes were emerging from the forest, each one easily twice the size of the largest Shadow Maw. But these weren't predators at all. They were adult Rillans. Dozens of them, armed with advanced weapons and moving with military precision. Dr. Korvek's distress signal had reached his homeworld, and his people had mounted a rescue mission that covered hundreds of light-years in record time. The Alpha Shadow Maw turned toward the windows, its keen senses detecting the approaching force. For a moment, Sarah thought the standoff would collapse into violence, as two groups of apex beings faced each other across the battlefield. But the pack leader made a decision that would be remembered in both human and Rillan records for generations to come. With a series of commanding calls, the Alpha ordered its pack to withdraw. One by one, The Shadowmaws melted back into the smoke and disappeared through the breached defenses. They moved like ghosts, their retreat as coordinated and intelligent as their assault had been. Within minutes, the outpost was empty except for Sarah and the family she had risked everything to protect. The storage room door burst open, and Korvek emerged with his cubs close behind him. Little Lyra ran straight to Sarah, her small arms wrapping around the human's legs, in a gesture of gratitude that needed no translation. The other cubs followed suit, their fear replaced by admiration for the strange being who had stood between them and certain death. "Dr. Chen," Korvek rumbled, his voice thick with emotion. "I have served in many conflicts across the galaxy, but I have never witnessed courage such as yours. You faced impossible odds to protect children who were not even your own species. This act will be recorded in our histories as an example of the finest qualities intelligent beings can possess." The Rillan rescue force surrounded the outpost within minutes, their advanced medical scanners ensuring that none of the survivors had sustained serious injuries. The team leader, a scarred veteran named Commander Thrix, approached Sarah with obvious respect in his golden eyes. "Human Sarah Chen," he said formally. "The Rillan Confederacy owes you a debt that can never be fully repaid. You have saved not just 3 young lives, but the future relationship between our peoples. Your actions tonight have proven that humans possess a protective instinct that makes them worthy allies in the dangerous regions of space." As the rescue teams evacuated the damaged outpost, Sarah found herself looking back toward the forest where the Shadowmaw pack had disappeared. Somewhere in those dark trees, an alpha predator was leading its followers back to their hunting grounds, carrying with it a new understanding of human courage and determination. The cubs would grow up to become ambassadors between their species and humanity, carrying stories of the day a lone human stood against impossible odds to protect them. Little Lyra would eventually become a renowned xenobiologist herself, inspired by Sarah's example to study the complex relationships between intelligent species across the galaxy. Back on Earth, Sarah's report would revolutionize humanity's understanding of predator intelligence and interspecies conflict resolution. But more importantly, her actions that night would establish a precedent for human behavior that would echo through the centuries. When innocent lives are threatened, humans don't calculate odds or weigh strategic advantages. They step forward, shield the vulnerable, and dare the darkness to try to pass. The Shadowmaw pack's withdrawal became legendary among frontier colonists, proof that even the most dangerous predators could recognize and respect true courage. And in the deepest regions of space, where humans continued to push the boundaries of exploration and discovery, the story of Sarah Chen became a beacon of hope for anyone facing impossible odds. Some fights cannot be won through superior firepower or advanced technology. Sometimes, the only weapon that matters is the willingness to stand between evil and innocence, regardless of the cost. On that night, in a damaged research outpost on a distant world, humanity proved once again why they had earned their place among the stars. The cubs were safe. The pack had withdrawn, with honor intact. And the universe had witnessed something that would be remembered long after the last star burned out, the sight of a human being who refused to yield when protecting those who could not protect themselves. In the end, that was what made humanity truly exceptional among the species of the galaxy. Not their technology, not their military might, but their absolute refusal to abandon those who depended on them, no matter how desperate the circumstances became.